And now on Nights with Steve Price, the Courses and Careers Show with Danny Bielik. Thanks to Management Consultancy International. Go to mci.edu.au.
We find Danny Bielik tonight in the Philippines, I think, in Manila. How are you, Danny?
I am very well, thanks, Steve. How are you?
What's the unemployment rate like in the Philippines?
Now you've just caught me with a stat I don't have off the top of my head, but I can tell you that youth unemployment is a major problem in the Philippines. One of the things that I've noticed after being over here is that they really haven't invested hugely in vocational education and training in particular, and there's really nothing short of people having to save up huge sums of money to be able to compete for very few university places over here. So really, that's the only option that people in the youth age brackets have in order to be able to advance themselves in Filipino society, and that contrasts massively to the sorts of opportunities that are available in Australia.
One of the things we're going to talk about tonight, and I'd welcome our listeners to give us a call on 131873, is there a job that you would refuse to do, no matter what people paid you to do it? We have a report about a lot of people in New South Wales refusing to take on so-called dirty jobs, which I don't call are dirty jobs, like plumbing and bricklaying, because they're not seen as fashionable. So have you ever refused a job that you could have easily have signed up for because you felt that it was too much of a manual labour job, that it was beneath you, that you didn't want to do it? And conversely, if you are an employer trying to find people to work in the areas of plumbing or bricklaying or as a sparky, do you have people saying, I don't want to do that work because it's too dirty? You wouldn't get away with doing that in the country you're currently in. There'd be plenty of jobs there where they probably get swamped with people if they decided they needed to open up their employment books.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. There are job boards on the internet over here, as there are in Australia. But when a job ad gets placed, they literally do get swamped, and it's no mean feat to be able to go through all of those CVs for any employer. The opportunities really aren't as good as they are in Australia. And it concerns me. But there are plenty of opportunities in Australia, definitely, Steve, that people are just passing up.
Back here, the youth unemployment rate is high. You would think it would not be difficult to find people to put their hands up to do any job.
Yeah, and it really is quite disappointing. This is the second time we've actually chatted about something similar. A few weeks ago, we were chatting about people not wanting to go and do things like fruit picking and backpackers, soaking up all of that sort of work. Well, here we are in our own state. Steve, we've got more than 90,000 people in the 15 to 24 age bracket just in New South Wales unemployed. That's higher than the national average. It's high. We've got a higher than national average fall in the number of apprenticeships. We know, Steve, that apprenticeships have fallen nationwide after Julia Gillard gutted the system. But even worse than that, in New South Wales, under a quite bullish New South Wales government that has seen, overall unemployment, not track the national average, we've seen massive falls in apprenticeships, much higher than we've seen in other states. And it really is a bit of a reflection of a couple of things. First of all, that there's an over-reliance on TAFE in New South Wales, which there isn't in other states. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that really there is this, perception amongst young people that some of these trade-based jobs that are very honourable jobs, and Steve, they're very high-paying jobs too, are just not desirable.
Well, what's not desirable about learning a trade as a plumber or a bricklayer or an electrician? Because I would have thought that if you live in the right area of the city or the state, given what we pay to get an electrician to come out to us or a plumber, you could make a very good income and a very good living, couldn't you?
You know, here we are in the CBD at MCI. We're right in the middle of Sydney CBD, and I can tell you, when we need a plumber, when something leaks, it's almost impossible to get one. When we need an electrician because the light's gone faulty, we often struggle to get one, and it is a really major problem. We ring these guys up and they say, yeah, mate, look, I've just got too many jobs on, and to be honest, I really don't want to. I don't want to crawl into the city. On the flip side, I'll tell you what's really interesting, Steve, and this is just my own personal observation. I'd love to hear from listeners if they have similar sorts of observations. We've got quite a number of young, fit, and healthy people working for us in our office. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about what goes on in the MCI office. When we need to put together a table, or we need to, hang a whiteboard on the wall, or do something that requires something that should be a basic skill, often people look at me and go, what are you talking about? I can't just pick up a screwdriver and do this. I can't just pick up a hammer and do it. And I end up having to, in my suit, roll my sleeves up, grab a screwdriver, show them the inside of a hardware store, and show them how it's done, the simplest thing. So, I think there really is this perception these days that a lot of work is done behind a keyboard, and all of these sorts of very, very valuable jobs and very high-paying jobs, Steve, are just going for want.
I didn't realise you were such a handyman, Danny, but if someone asked me to put together a table, I'd probably struggle as well. But you're right, those basic skills that we once learnt at school. I remember doing at least 3 years at school of woodwork. I was appalling at it, but we used to go to either sheet metal work or woodwork, and you left school with a basic skill. You knew how to use a plane, or you knew how to use a drill. You knew how to use a saw. I don't think they even do that in school anymore, do they?
Well, they must do, but you know what, Steve?
I wouldn't know. Does anyone do woodwork at school anymore? Give us a call and let me know. I wouldn't have a clue.
I'd love to hear it, because I tell you, when I went to school in Year 7, we went into the woodwork and metal workshop, and we did it, and it was compulsory. Now, this is back in the 80s, and I'm sure this is before all the OH&S people went a little bit crazy on the world. But we were there with saws and hammers and bench drills and vices and all sorts of dangerous things. And we were taught to use a screwdriver and a drill and a hammer and a wrench and a shifter and the whole lot. We were taught to do all of it because, Steve, there are some things that you can just do yourself, but equally it gives people a taste for, maybe this is what I want to do. Maybe this is a really good way to earn money for my family. Maybe this is a really good way to be my own man or my own woman and own my own business or be a contractor on a larger project. Yeah,
they taught us how to do dovetail joints. I don't think I've ever done one since. I couldn't do one properly back then, and so I was probably a failure at woodwork. Calls on that, 131873. Do you know? Are they still teaching basic things like woodwork and how to do joints and make tables at school, or has that all gone out the window? The other question when we come back from the break with Danny, who's in the Philippines tonight, would you move to a regional town, somewhere like Dubbo, to get, if there was a job there? Would you uproot yourself from Sydney and head off out into the bush to a rural centre like an Albury or a Dubbo or an Orange or a Mudgee? If you knew there was work there, would you leave Sydney and go and take a job there? Back with Danny from Management Consultancy International after this.
You're listening to the Courses and Career Show with Danny Bielik. Thanks to Management Consultancy International. Go to mci.edu.au.
Danny is in the Philippines. It's interesting, the Mayor of Dubbo, Matthew Dickerson, I understand, Danny, has told the Daily Telegraph that there are, quote, hundreds of jobs in his town for unemployed people from Sydney.
Yeah, there are, and you know what, I mean, this is what's really interesting. People always complain, and I know a lot of people ring up the Courses and Career Show and they email afterwards and do all sorts of things to try and contact me and say, look, I've been trying to do this, that and the other. One thing that a lot of people don't try and do, Steve, is move. Once upon a time we moved to the western suburbs to try and build those great suburbs on which, our city relies. But there are huge numbers of regional centres that have great lifestyles and they are starving for particularly tradespeople, but pretty much any workers. So they need high-skilled, medium-skilled and low-skilled workers in a lot of towns. So if you pick your Dubbo, your Albury, Griffith, even your Lismores and those sorts of places, they really do need lots of people, and there are plenty of fit and healthy unemployed people in the 19 to 19 to 24 age bracket in Sydney who could do with a really good stint in the bush.
Interestingly, the Dubbo Mayor is not talking in Dubbo about, working in the local cattle yard herding cattle or working in the meatworks or any of those sorts of, typically rural jobs. He needs people working in the health and the retail sectors.
Yeah, look, in regional areas, just like in Sydney and in other capitals around Australia, there is an ageing population. There are the same sorts of issues that we have in other parts of Australia. So you've got an ageing population that needs to be taken care of. A lot of care is not done in institutions now. It's done in the community, so people live in their homes, or maybe they live with family and they need they need a little bit of extra care every once in a while. People need to drive around and deliver meals.
Absolutely
People
right.
need to, so often it's simple stuff.
Joe, you're going to move for work, are you? You there,
Hello?
Joe? Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
No, I'm not going to move for work. I've retired now. But I'm just saying that I used to do a lot of work for corporate business in the city for quite a number of years. And you put your bill in and you put your parking costs on it. And the customers would go, well, hang on, I'm not paying for your parking costs.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from the fact that there was very little parking, and there's even less now. So by the time you drive around to try and get a parking spot somewhere close to the job, you've spent an hour. It's taken you an hour and a half to get into the bloody joint.
Well, that's probably the reason why, Danny, you're having trouble getting tradesmen in the city.
Joe, I think you're 100% right. I can tell you when we try and get a plumber out, they say we're going to have to load $100 on the bill, and we've got to cop it on the chin. But the reality is that they can turn down the work because there is plenty of work around. And if there wasn't plenty of work around, they would find a way to come in on the train or the bus, or maybe they'll cop some of the parking costs themselves. But the reality is, parking is very difficult and it is very expensive, no two ways about it, but they can turn down the work because there is lots of other work around and not enough tradespeople to do it.
Is it Jerry? How are you?
Hello?
Yes, Jerry or Jerry?
Jared, sorry, that's okay.
That's okay.
Well, I'm in a job at the moment, but if I was out of work and not in kind of the out of job commitments I have at the moment, I would definitely move to a country town knowing that there are jobs there.
I reckon I would too. And I've always had a feeling that, I've always wanted to actually live in the country. I'd love to experience working in rural Australia.
Yeah, well, I've lived for very short periods of time out in the country.
Yep.
Just visiting relatives and stuff for short periods of time, and I love it out there. And I've even done some work on the vineyards and stuff. And I'm a competent professional in my own field. And if I had to, if I found myself out of work again, I probably would move out there for definite.
Well, you don't have all the hassles of traffic and travelling to work and trying to get through, we've talked all week about the M4 and all the dramas of trying to get around Sydney. I mean, imagine waking up in a country town and driving 10 minutes to your job.
Yeah, the only problem I could see with it, though, would be the logistics of actually the move itself.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot further distance. You have to make sure you have the house and you've got all the, you've got the ability to move everything you've got that long distance.
Jerry, I got to tell you, you're right. But to be honest, people move to London and they go and spend a couple of years over there. They move to Singapore. They move to all those sorts of places. Move to Albury. Move to Dubbo. There are places, these are great places. They will learn a lot and they'll get a job and they'll be in Australia and they will probably learn stuff that honestly you wouldn't learn in London or New York.
Plus, Danny and Jarrett, the basic cost of living is so much lower. I mean, everything you think about, going out to eat, joining the local golf club or the local bowls club, any of that stuff is much cheaper than when you're doing it in the city. So I think moving's an absolute no-brainer.
I think it's not like it was in the 70s and 80s, Steve. A lot of country towns are where some of the best restaurants in New South Wales are. There are great things to do on weekends. You know, it's a terrific place. If you're a family, what a great place for kids to grow up. It sure beats being in a high-rise in Zetland.
As it ever. Keith, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Steve. Yeah, look, I just wanted to offer my thoughts about why people don't want to get into trades.
Yes.
I've got a friend who's a early 60s. He's a industrial arts master with the public high schools, and he's just retired, but he's now doing going back to work to do part-time relief teaching, and that's because of the shortage, right?
Yep.
And of course, you often hear in the papers about, oh look, we've got a shortage of mathematics teachers, we've got a shortage of science teachers, but now more and more now, and I heard from my friend, there is a shortage of industrial arts teachers.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that's right, Keith. You know, what has happened over the years is that various governments in New South Wales have spent hundreds of millions of dollars developing these unbelievable trades training centres in various TAFEs around New South Wales. Those TAFEs, those facilities have been locked out to any private providers, so nobody's been able to use those. They sit there dormant a lot of the time, and they've soaked up a lot of these people who are good trades teachers, are basically locked up inside the TAFEs. Now, if you were to get a lot of those teachers and put them back into the high schools and teach a lot of kids some basic stuff and make those opportunities available for kids in year 8, kids in year 9, kids in year 10, you would see people with a greater level of interest in those sorts of things, and you would create a virtuous circle, and that virtuous circle's effectively been broken.
Good on you, Keith. And it shouldn't have been broken, should it, Danny? We should have kept all of that stuff up. It was good enough to do in the 60s and 70s. Why wouldn't you do it now?
You know, no matter how smart we get or how clever we think we are, and we're pretty clever. I mean, there's no two ways about it. We've got some amazing people do incredible things, really innovative things in Australia. But I tell you what, the innovative things stop when your toilet blocks up.
Exactly. Jason, g'day, how are you?
Steve, my best friend 2 weeks ago was living in the city with a wife and 3 kids, $650 a week. 2 weeks ago, found a place in Windsor, changed jobs, and got a 5-bedroom house with a pool, double brick garage. Guess how much?
How much?
Yep, $350 rent compared to a 3-bedroom unit in the city for $650.
Half the price.
Yep,
and the work's there, and
a pool,
and a job.
Yep. He looked in because he's got his own removalist truck.
Yep.
And he just picked up 9 months worth of work out at Windsor.
How good's that? I mean, it
Yep.
just
Jason,
shows.
I think that's incredible. You know, there's so much. We call it the logistics industry, which is a very fancy name. But I tell you what, whether it's local taxi trucks or B doubles going up and down the highways, this is what keeps Australia moving and always will. And they're great jobs, and there's plenty of them all over the country.
Great call, Jason. Thank you for that. Danny, you enjoy yourself in the Philippines. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, Steve.
Danny Bielik there from Management Consultancy International.